done.
So you just referenced the what might be considered the paying customer. Not everyone likes that word, but the student who, in many cases operates across an institution, right? And then there's others like funders of research that perhaps are more targeted. Sure, administrative overhead maybe spreads across, but the intent is more targeted in many cases. In general, how are expenses allocated as revenue comes in?
Yeah, so again, it gets back to the issue we have in higher ed that expenses are just too lumpy, meaning the buckets are too big. So we can't really get our arms well around activity and tie that activity to the cost to deliver on supporting it, goods and services, programs and services. And we can't then tie that into the revenue that's been generated so that we kind of see how this all works. So we have a problem, it's I just invented this now, the financial bucket problem in higher ed. The buckets are too big, so we just can't connect what we're spending where for what and what we get for it. So it's a granularity problem, quite frankly.
So maybe let's get specific of how we would solve it, right? Because today, famously, right, people, boards will say, how much does it cost to produce an English major? How much does it cost to produce a computer science major? And because the buckets are so big, we don't know the answer. How could we get at that answer to really understand how much it costs to produce students in these different buckets?
Yeah. So here's the great news. It's actually possible to do. You can go into an institution, and we do it all the time at an R1 level, community colleges, everything in between, to answer that very question, Michael, of what does it cost for this program or this service? However, it's very manual and it's very time consuming because you are connecting across different data systems, right? You have a system and a set of data around student activity, these student information systems, right? You have a system for tracking people and paying them, all our HR payroll systems. We have registration systems, but we don't have an ability to tie all that together, quite frankly. So there is a tool issue, quite frankly, that would need to be addressed. But also, we have to start thinking about more discrete units. And we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier with Jeff's question, so that even for things as mundane as general ledger design, right? Where back to our example we had of the faculty member in biology, when we pay that faculty member, they hit a bucket called biology. Ideally, when you paid them, you would pay them a piece for their undergraduate biology that they're teaching. There'd be a piece that you're paying them for their graduate biology. There's a piece you're paying them for the nursing, so that at the time the expense happens, you can see actually where it's going in terms of the unit that it's benefiting. So we'd have to get system alignment from general ledger structures on down. We have to get reporting in place. And we have to have an agreement, quite frankly, that we should be doing this so that we can have clear roles and responsibilities. And it becomes a real issue. If you look right now at the number of institutions implementing new ERP systems, right? These large scale computer systems to track everything, that are spending tens of millions of dollars, years of effort, and still are not thinking about this granularity question. So they're going to be able to answer what are some pretty fundamental things. What does it cost us to do the various things that we do?
Who's against making that change, or why isn't it being tackled?
So I think one is historical, Michael, in that, look, for a long period of time, let's say certainly post-World War, at least into the 60s and beyond, generally speaking, in higher ed, you know, revenue and expense kind of pretty much worked out because we had a growing number of students or customers. We had strong support within many sectors from state and local sources, seeing higher ed as more of a public good. We had lower inflationary periods. We were able to expand in new parts of the market, whether it was for graduate students or into adults, etc. So should colleges have operated at a more granular level so they could be better stewards of resources? I would say yes. Did they really have to? Well, there wasn't as much urgency. And then when you look at, accountability, Candidly, leaders weren't being held accountable, right? For, you know, even at a board level, I don't think people are saying, do we make or lose money on English versus engineering? As long as the auditor said your audit was clean and the bottom line worked every year. That's not the world we live in anymore. First of all, students are paying, a huge chunk of the cost to go to college. They have different ideas of what outcomes are, and colleges don't have the same level of resource anymore in terms of allocating it. So it means they have to have a better understanding of where to put those resources. So there's an historical component. I think there's also a cultural component, in that people push back against the idea that we're not going to look at the institution as a whole, but we're going to look at its discrete parts. And you tend to get to more, whether you want to call it winners or losers, or growth opportunity areas that you want to invest more in, that can run counter to culture at institutions.